Howdy, y'all, from icy Austin, Texas. So good to know y'all are here. I'm going to add the people that are here in my waiting room. Welcome to this talk with Dr. Avrum Weiss, or you could call him Avrum Weiss, Ph.D., or you could call him Avrum.
That'd be fine.
Liz, I see you're in the room or in the studio. Welcome to the studio. I guess we're going to be able to see everyone, Avrum. I haven't been able to test this with more than you and me.
Okay.
So we're going to find out how it goes. We have 2 minutes until we launch into the meat and potatoes of our conversation. And, you know, I'm not a professional DJ, so I'm okay with a little dead air. I have some friends that are professional DJs. Hi, Deborah. Good to see you. Deborah, meet Avrum. Deborah's in
Hi.
Houston.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Liz is in Austin. Avrum is in Maine. Let's see who else is joining us because we have another minute. And I know we can only fit 10 people into the studio at a time. But I bet there's some people out there watching us on Facebook and YouTube. How does that feel? Woohoo!
Sounds good.
Super exciting, right? We're broadcasting on 2 Facebook pages, my personal page and A Nurtured Life, which is my co-ed community. And then we're also broadcasting on, the studio is full, y'all. We have a full house. I can't
Wonderful.
see who else is here, though. Hi, y'all. I don't see your name. So if you want to drop your name in the chat when you're saying hi and saying, yes, we're here, please let us know who you are. And I'm going to introduce our guest. It's high noon. I'd love to know who else is here. So drop your name in. I see Liz Richardson and I see Deborah. And then I know the studio can accommodate 8 more people. And then, of course, out there in social media land, I'm sure there's other people watching. So if you wouldn't mind, put in the comments as you're impressed or moved or surprised by something that you hear Avrum say, please post. That helps our algorithms. It helps more people to hear the message that Avrum has. And that's really the point of all this, is to help people get along better, to create more harmony. Let's call it less fear, more relatedness. Oh, now I see. I'm letting Dawn in, letting Anastasia in, letting Aisha in. Gosh, hi, loves. Adding Stephanie Burno in. Welcome. Meryl was here. Hi, Jenny. Good to see you all. Oh, my gosh. Well, welcome to Avrum's living room. Welcome to my back porch where the heater's blasting. Because in case y'all don't know, it's pretty darn chilly. Okay, Avrum, let's just find out. How cold is it in Maine?
In Maine, it's a warm day today. It's in the low 20s.
It's in the low 20s. It's downright toasty. And in Austin, there's still ice and snow on the ground, although I see some icicles dripping. So it looks like perhaps we're thawing out. But most of the people I see on here are in Texas, and it's what we call cold, 30. So glad y'all are here. Let me see if there's anyone else I need to let in. We have a full house. I know people are watching us on social media as well. I'd like to introduce a special person that was introduced to me by my friend Becca. She was reading his book. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight: How Men's Fears of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. And since so far we're all women in here, I know that most of us are probably female-bodied creatures who are fascinated by relationships and eat, breathe, live, drink, sleep our relationships, not to mention talking about them incessantly. And here we have a man who's also fascinated by relationships. And like most men, probably fascinated by women, but we'll let him tell us that in a minute. Avrum Weiss is a Ph.D. psychologist and author. He has been interested during his career in big questions that other people seemingly ignore, like what is the process of change? And in a minute, I'm going to ask him a question how he discovered men's fears of women. And he lives on an island off the coast of Maine with his wife, who's an author as well, and with his dog. And we're going to talk about some questions that I have, and then we're going to take some questions from our studio audience. And we really appreciate y'all being here. The more understanding we have, the more we can adjust our behavior compassionately. And my purpose here, Karen Leba Baker, is to shed light on areas that are shameful, not talked about, embarrassing, taboo, just to shed light on the entire human experience. So, Avrum, I'm going to see if I can get you and me on the screen together, not solo. I don't want to be by myself. I want to be with you. Not that. Not that.
Can't help you.
I'm beyond help if you want to know the truth. Okay, so I guess we're just going to have it like this because I don't know how else to bring you on screen. So it's going to be you and me and the rest of the people in the studio. So Avrum, question, when was your book published, first of all?
2021, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, something like that.
Good, congratulations.
Thank you.
And have you been speaking about this topic prior to, or how many years have you been working on the question of men's fears?
About 10 years. I'm a little slow. Every book I've written has taken me 8 years, and I keep thinking I'm going to streamline it and be faster, but it takes a long time to really learn about something enough to write about it.
That's right. 10 years is about right.
Well, good.
When I
That's how long it takes.
entrepreneurs, I talk to them about 10-year cycles also.
Okay, good.
So what clued you into this? How did you catch the scent, so to speak?
It's pretty straightforward. I work with a lot of men as a therapist, and I started noticing I was hearing the same thing again and again. And what I kept hearing is men would come to my office and talk about the things they were unhappy about in their relationships, which, run the gamut.
Okay, wait just 1 second. Ladies, I want you to hear this, that men would come to his office and they would talk about the things that they were unhappy about in their relationships. I'm just wondering if that comes as a surprise to anyone, because women are often talking about the things we're unhappy about in our relationships, but I think often we don't know that men do that.
Let me add a piece before we ask them, which is that they're not always there entirely voluntarily. Sometimes they end up there because their wives have said to them, look, either you get help or else.
Okay, I hear that.
Yeah.
So they've been drafted into your office.
Sometimes. And, it would naturally, when people would tell me all the things they were unhappy about, I would naturally ask, well, have you talked with your wife about any of these? At which point they would give me a look as if I had just asked the stupidest question a human being could possibly ask. And how could I not understand that they haven't, and they're terrified to talk with their wives about them? And so it gradually occurred to me that they weren't talking to their wives, what they believed. And I would ask, why haven't you talked with her about it? This bothers you so much. They said, it'll make things worse. Every time I try to talk to her about it, it just makes things worse. And it gradually occurred to me, I would say, it sounds like you're afraid to talk to her. It sounds like that you don't really feel like you sort of know how to talk with her. And they started agreeing with me. And so I started asking more and more and sort of just gradually expanding my understanding of the many ways in which men are afraid of their intimate partners.
I wonder if that comes as a revelation to anyone. So, I mean, you're suggesting that the reason why men don't talk might not be the reasons that we ascribe to them not talking. There may be another motivation behind that.
What reason would you ascribe?
Well, they're repressed, they're emotionally shut down, they're jerks, they're selfish.
And I figured that was in there somewhere. So the first part is right, but the reason they are repressed and emotionally shut down has to do with their fears. So let me give you a great example. I just finished a wonderful book called When Boys Become Boys, which is written by a psychologist who moved into a classroom for 3 years to study a small group of boys. And contrary to your expectations, those boys in pre-K were not shut down, not emotionally repressed, very tender, affectionate, warm. But over the period of time she were with those boys, she watched the transformation. And she tells this one poignant story where each kid is asked to go to the front of the room and name which of the songs we've learned this year did you like the best? Which was your favorite song? And one boy gets in the front of the room and he starts to say, my favorite song was the lullaby. And then he looks down and he sees the boys in the front row looking disapprovingly at him. And he says, no, I was just kidding. My favorite song is the Marine Corps anthem. And so he, by the age of, let's say, 5, had already figured out what was acceptable as a boy and what would be shunned or disapproved of as a boy, and had already changed what he showed to the world at the age of 5 based on what he thought was expected of him as a boy, not even as a man. And so men are repressed and shut down and withdrawn, but not because they're jerks, but because they're terrified. What was interesting, and it's not the first study, that boys and young men are as invested in their friendships as girls are. Their friendships matter to them just as much as your friendships matter to you, but they become untenable. It becomes increasingly difficult for boys because they're not supposed to be close with other people. They're not even supposed to be close with girls. Boys shame each other for being close to women. So what you're seeing and describing are the defenses that men use to protect their fear.
Okay, you just said a lot. That's a lot to process. Okay, have you ever read Martin Prechtel's work?
No.
I'm not going to go into it too much, but he explores the tribal cultures in Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. And he talks about the coming of age ceremonies that the young men go through and how they bond with the other men and how they take on their own self-authority. And I want to know, has it always been like this in Western culture? Are you able to address that?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer about whether it's, but it seems to me as if it has. And I'll tell you another coming of age story that perfectly illustrates what we're talking about. So there's a topic of great interest now where people are writing about fragile masculinity. And the idea behind this is that women are women from the day they're born and don't have to do anything to be a woman. Men, for males, masculinity, becoming a man, is something you have to go through a rite of initiation to earn. And masculinity is defined for men primarily as not feminine. In other words, there's not a way to be a man. There's a way not to be. And that way not to be is feminine, which means not warm, not intimate, not open, not vulnerable. So in another coming of age story, so most of these stories, the boys live with their mom and other women until puberty. And then as they get near the age of puberty, the men literally symbolically kidnap him and take him out to the woods where they essentially torture him for several days to initiate him into manhood. Then they bring him back to the village. And in this culture, when the boy comes back to the village, the mother meets him at the edge of the village and the boy slaps his mother. That's what the ritual prescribes. And then he goes to the women's hut gets his stuff and moves back in with the men. So my question to you and to the people watching, why slap her? Why not just go right to the women's hut and get your stuff and move into the men's hut?
That's a good question. Why slap her?
What function
Studio
does the slap
audience
serve?
or audience out in the social media land, why does he slap her? I'm assuming that this is a ritual for a reason.
Yes.
That the elders designed it with wisdom in mind.
Yes. So what does the slap accomplish? Why not just go and get your stuff and move in with the men?
I have a feeling about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I have the water on. I feel like that is more about not being able to go back, like that. Like it's almost like cutting the umbilical cord in a way that it has to be violent and it has to be unretractable in order to, just get that pain over all at once.
I like what you're saying a lot. It actually hadn't occurred to me. I think you're spot on. I think that that's what he's doing for himself. I think if he didn't slap his mother, what might he do in that moment?
I was thinking like he would probably hug her, which is really feminine.
Right.
And so he had to greet her aggressively, which I mean, a slap is pretty extreme.
Yep.
But to me, that was the equivalent. Like, I'm not here to greet you with love. I'm a man. I'm here to greet you sternly while you're coming to greet me with love. And so that's what he was just doing the opposite, which is pretty tough.
I totally agree. And I think, remember those of you who may have sons, you remember that day when you dropped him off at school and he pushed you away when you tried to hug him goodbye.
Oh, yes.
That's what he was doing. I think if he didn't slap his mother in that moment, I think he might have just burst into tears, because it's a little boy who's just been kidnapped and tortured by a group of scary men for 3 days. What would a little boy do when he saw his mommy? He would go crying, running into her arms, as you say. And the other purpose of the slap is he's letting the other men know that he's forsaken his mother, that he is now with them, and being with them, to be with them, he has to prove that he's no longer with the women. So it's not just enough to move in, he has to slap her. And that's what you see in heterosexual relationships. You see men, when they get threatened, either literally or symbolically, slapping their partners, pushing them away to protect themselves, to hide their own fears.
Okay, the mind is reeling. Okay, so one Facebook user, Avrum, said the reason behind it is control and authority. Another said to show that they stepped into their manliness. Jenny and Aisha, both of you, thank you for bringing your voices to the room. The other thing I'm seeing, and I don't know because I don't know about the culture you're describing specifically, but to assert their dominance.
So it is to assert dominance. It is to be controlling. And that's what people usually think it's about. But people feel the need to assert dominance when they're afraid. If you're secure, you don't need to assert your dominance. And so the cover that I wanted to use for the book, it didn't get used, is a graphic image of a male stick figure and a female stick figure on a teeter-totter, like a seesaw. You know what that is?
Yes.
And the man is in the up position and the woman is in the bottom position. And you look at that and you think, see, there it is. Men are in the dominant position. But if you look more carefully, you can see the woman has 1 foot off the teeter-totter and 1 foot on the teeter-totter. And what you realize is, although the man is in a dominant position, if that woman takes one more step off, he goes crashing to the ground.
So she's actually balancing.
Yes. She has the power to bring him crashing to the earth.
Okay.
And he knows that in some sense. Although he's sitting on top of the world, he knows that it's entirely, that his well-being is entirely, this is why, Karen, when men and women divorce, who gets married sooner? Who gets remarried sooner?
I don't know. Tell me.
Men, by far. Men get, so if men don't need women, as they would like you to believe, how come men get remarried first?
Okay.
Because they do, because they understand the ways in which they're dependent on women. They see that 1 foot off the teeter-totter, and they're terrified that she'll abandon them, that she'll leave, and they'll come crashing to earth.
They're asserting their authority and their dominance because they're experiencing dependency.
Yeah.
And they aren't versed in expressing dependency in a healthy way. So they're expressing it in an alienating way.
Well, men are taught to be self-reliant. Men are taught to not need help from anyone for anything. And the last person you should rely on it from a man's point of view is a woman. And so also, I don't know why I'm talking today about things I wished were in the book, but I wanted the book to be called Pussy Whipped. And that didn't go over.
That would have been hot.
But think about it. Pussy whipped is the worst thing one man can say to another man. Why? Why is that such an insult? Because you're implying, not only on one level, you're implying you need women. Another, if you think about it, what you're implying is that you are controlled by your need for women. And so myths and fairy tales and all are filled with stories of men who are brought to ruin because of their need of women. Open the Bible to the first chapter, and what's the first story you read? Adam, all of humanity being brought to ruin by believing Eve when she says, eat this apple.
Okay, Avrum, and everybody else that's listening, take a deep breath and let it out with a sigh.
The Greek version is Pandora. Pandora unleashes all evil into the world. Men write, and these are stories written by men.
Okay, I want our audience to digest a little bit. So everybody breathe, let it out with a sigh. Deep breath. There's a lot of accuracy and honesty, and you're hitting on some tender spots for people I know. So the comments in the posts, Avrum, are, I love how he's explaining it. This is so good.
Yeah.
A parade of hearts. So I'm talking to Avrum Weiss, Ph.D. He is a contributor to Psychology Today, and he's written a book called Hidden in Plain Sight, How Men's Fears,
Plural. I wish it was
in
just
plain
one.
sight, how men's fears of women shape their intimate relationships. And one person said, yes, I definitely need to digest this. The honesty is amazing. So Avrum, you got nominated by your own curiosity and exploration to be a spokesperson for men's fears. So how's that coming down? Like, how is that being received?
It's being received very differently by men and women. So the typical response from men, I will demonstrate for you. When you use the word, when you say to a man, I think you're scared of women, it's not a compliment. So the first response you get is they literally kind of bow up and they get defensive. But that never lasts more than 30 to 60 seconds. Within 30 to 60 seconds, and I've talked to hundreds of men about this, every single straight man that I've talked to about this, within 60 seconds has gone, that makes a lot of sense. That actually explains a lot. And then we're opening all kinds of new stuff to talk about. Women think I've lost my mind. Women basically think that there's no way in hell. How could it possibly be true? Men have all the privilege, all the power. How could men possibly be scared of women? And if you don't mind, I will read you a quote from a woman who attended a workshop about this.
Please do.
She said, I understand that my husband has not been ignoring, dismissing, or hurting me out of a lack of respect, as I had suspected, but that he's scared. Scared to hurt me, to mess up with me, to not be enough. I had honestly never imagined that he was scared and that I was so profoundly important to him that he was constantly terrified I would leave him. So that's a woman's
my
reality.
gosh. So that old wound of fear of abandonment,
Absolutely.
need for approval.
There's an amazing, you can Google it and find it very quickly if you look up the still face experiment, STILL. And it's an experiment in which they take a mother and an infant, and the two of them are playing with each other and interacting and making goofy faces and smiling and laughing. And then the mothers are instructed to turn away and turn back with a still face. Not an angry face, not a disapproving face, just a non-expressive face. And the babies within 60 seconds have lost it. Within 60 seconds of the absence of approval from their mother, they are sobbing. They literally, some of them soiled themselves, lost bodily control. Again, not being mean or critical or hostile, just not validating and supporting and loving. And so grown-up men are not that different. What was interesting in that study is the boy babies got more upset and stayed upset longer. And in adult heterosexual relationships, when there's conflict, guess what? Men, measured by physiological arousal, get more upset and stay upset longer.
Right. That's why men have to go into their man cave, because they need to process the upset through their denser tissues.
I'm so glad you said that. So why do men need men caves? Why does a man need a man cave?
Well,
Women
because they're
don't
cavemen.
women caves.
I don't know. They're cavemen. I don't know. Tell us.
Well, I think that the whole man cave thing is about men's fears. I think it's they're trying to find a space where they're safe, that they don't feel equipped to hold their own in their relationships, so they need a refuge.
Okay, y'all keep breathing. Okay, I'm going to read you some comments, Avrum.
Right.
Let me be one man to tell you how much I love what you're doing, and I admire your courage.
Oh, thank
Having
you.
this conversation creates the possibility for healing.
Yes, it does. And I'll say
And
more about that
another-
at some point.
Another says, no, not at all do I think you are crazy, and I am a woman. It makes so much sense now.
That's the response I'm looking for. I think once you understand this, a lot about your relationships and a lot about why you keep having the same argument again and again and again and nothing changes start to make sense.
Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions right now, but first I'm going to address the book. I want to just mention that the book is called Hidden in Plain Sight: How Men's Fears of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. I'm going to ask a question about mothers again, so remind me if I forget about it. Please go on Amazon and peruse the book. Order a copy, share it with your friends.
I can also put the link
yes.
in the chat.
Please put the link in the chat. Yeah, that would be great.
There you go.
Okay, let's see. Did I get it in my private chat? I did. Okay, so how do I copy this? Oh, gosh. I was afraid I was going to do something like that.
It
Copy
shows up
link
on my
address,
screen.
put it right here. So here's the link to Avrum's book.
I also want to say that there's a Facebook group called Men's Fears of Women, and I will respond to any questions. I know I email a lot of people who say, oh, we get too many emails, we can't respond to them all. I will respond, and almost always within 24 hours. So if you just go to Facebook and put in the search Men's Fears of Women, there's a Facebook discussion group, and I'm happy to answer questions there.
Thank you very much. That's very much appreciated. So we're going to be on until the top of the hour. We have a little bit over 30 minutes. This also will be broadcast. Liz, I put the link in the public chat. Oh, how do I put it in the public chat? Let me see if I can put it in there. Thank you, Liz. You're my girl. You're my wing woman. Do you see it now? Okay, we're going to get to that. What can we do as women to help? I want to address that when Becca brought Avrum's book to my attention, she was reading it cover to cover, and every morning she would come with her latest discovery. And she knew that it was falling on fertile soil in my heart and spirit, because I've been teaching women how to stop beating men up for a long time, which doesn't mean that I've mastered it by any means. I'm still teaching it because I still blow it on a regular basis. And where I've seen the most damage has been in my relationship with my 18-year-old son, where I haven't allowed him to feel. He's a very tender, sensitive human, as are we all, until we learn to armor ourselves. And I've seen myself unconsciously teach him that I'm not safe to be tender around. And so that addresses what can women do to help. I've been teaching a class called How to Talk to Men by the book of the same name, really showing women a reflection of how do men respond when we think we're being perfectly reasonable, and how does it actually impact the other? What's it like to be interacted with by you as a woman when you're feeling justified or rationalizing how you're behaving? So, self-reflection is probably one of the strongest tools that I've ever found. But let's go back to a little bit of theory. If men's fears of women are hidden, how are we supposed to know when a man is afraid?
When he acts guarded, defensive, withdrawn, closed, you can assume that fear is underneath that.
Okay, say it again slowly.
Sure. Anytime a man withdraws or gets angry or critical or guarded or shut down, you can assume he's scared. Men are socialized to believe that it's not okay for them to be emotional other than one emotion. The only emotion that is socially acceptable for men to express is anger. And so it's confusing because men look and sound angry when they're not. Mostly they're threatened.
Okay, so men look and sound angry when they're not. It's a defensive reaction to the fear that they're feeling.
It's the same thing dogs do. If you have a dog, what does a dog, if you scare a dog and the dog's threatened, what does the dog do? Growls at you. That's what men are doing. So you look and say, "Oh, that's an aggressive dog." No, that's a frightened dog. It's being aggressive, but you've scared it.
Okay, go here with me, Avrum.
Uh-huh.
This is going to be an uncomfortable question.
Okay.
For our listeners to deal with. I'm sure you've already tread on this ground. So let's say a man withdraws or he becomes critical, and we keep going after him. What can we expect?
You can expect an escalation. So it goes like this. Typical argument in an intimate heterosexual relationship. Women start by asking for something. Men interpret that as needy. But the reason women are more likely to be the one to start off by talking about some kind of dissatisfaction is that the relationship isn't going as well for them as it is for the man to start with. Men and women are often working at cross purposes and don't realize it. Women are trying to get more connected and closer. Men are just trying to keep things calm and not have her be upset with them. So the woman has learned from experience that if she asks for what she really wants, he's going to get defensive and back away. If she says, "Why don't you and I ever spend some time together? Could we just have some time to cuddle and talk and hang out together?" He's going to get defensive. So instead she says, "You should spend more time with the children." Or, "How come you don't pick up around the house?" She makes the request very concrete, hoping that he won't get as defensive. But no matter how careful she is, it's likely that the man is going to hear it as critical. And so she's trying to make a connection through this request. He hears it as critical and withdraws. So she's getting the opposite of what she wants. She's trying to make a request and he's withdrawing further. So what happens? She gets more upset because she's asking for more connection and she's getting more distance. And what happens to the man when the woman gets more upset? Men are trained to believe that we're responsible for your happiness. So if you're unhappy, we're failing. We're inadequate. We're not doing our jobs as men if you're unhappy. So we get more upset, more angry, more withdrawn, and we try to stop you from being so emotional. Because when you're emotional, two things happen for us. One is it's stirring our own feelings, which we're not comfortable with. And the other is it's making us feel inadequate. We're inadequate in making you happy. We're inadequate in keeping you satisfied. And so then we try to control your feelings. So then we tell you, don't be so emotional. Be rational like me. Act like an adult. You're behaving like a child. All of which to try to lower the emotional temperature in the relationship, not to get you to be different, but to calm our own fears. And it just keeps escalating from there.
This is amazing. Okay, comments, Avrum. This is so familiar. I am grateful to hear that. Ha ha ha, true. Josh and I are laughing so hard. This used to be us 100%. And someone else said, barking dogs don't bite, question mark.
They do.
Okay, so there's no one on this call that hasn't experienced this.
Exactly.
One person said, I've heard it so many times from my 16-year-old son. Okay, so can you give us a little bit more detail about the escalation? I said it was going to be uncomfortable, but I want you to take us there because my experience as a woman learning similar information for many years is that until we actually get the cost of it, there is no impetus to change. So can you please tell us what happens next if the woman keeps on escalating?
Well, the size of the defense always equals the size of the threat. So the more threatening the situation becomes, the more men escalate to the point sometimes of violence. There's a lot of research, and this is sort of politically incorrect, but there's a lot of research that violence in domestic relationships is initiated by men feeling threatened. So the ultimate escalation is violence. But short of that, you have, couples living as sort of estranged roommates who have, I can't tell you how many men, I work with a guy who filed for divorce and is now divorced from his wife and never once ever said anything to her about what he was unhappy about in the marriage. He just suffered silently until he filed for divorce, and she never had any idea of what he was unhappy about. So a lot of silent suffering is what it escalates to. Look at the data about how unhappy men are in their lives. Men commit suicide at a much higher rate. Men are more anxious, more depressed, we don't live as long. Men are not doing so well, and this is a big part of it.
Okay. Everybody take a deep breath. Let it out. Someone said we escalate because at that point we feel unheard.
The man or a woman said that?
I believe I'm not sure.
Okay.
Whoever just wrote that last comment, let us know your gender identification.
Of course, either a man or a woman could have said that.
Either could have said that. So when you say the research is there about family violence, domestic violence, are you doing any education in that arena?
I am, but they say it's politically incorrect. There are people who are very reactive.
Bring it on, man.
Well, we can talk about it in places like this, but I can tell you there are other places I've been where people have been very reactive to that, and they want. It is very difficult. Certainly, the patriarchy is a system created by men for men's advantage. It's very difficult then to look and see the ways in which the same system created by men harms men as well. One of my favorite quotes is Martin Luther King said, "Segregation scars the soul of the perpetrated as well as the victim."
That's
You
right.
can't create a system that oppresses other people without also being harmed by it. And so, we're just finally now, in the last 50 years, starting to look at the ways in which the patriarchy has been harmful to women. But now maybe we're willing to also look at the ways in which the same system is harmful to men. Even though they created it and benefit from it, doesn't mean that they're not harmed by it.
Someone said, I was just thinking this exact thing. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Okay.
I want to make 2 quick comments. Avrum's book, the link is above. It's on Amazon. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight: How Men's Fears of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. If this topic is of interest to you, I will be bringing more topics like this. You can go to my website, businessaspleasure.com, business as pleasure. And I called it that because I was tired of business as usual. And then we also have on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, A Nurtured Life is the name of the Facebook group. And it's my co-ed group to bring conversations about how our lives and our relationships, and by extension, our families, our villages, and our nations can be more nurturing. It's very important to me to influence people's understanding and their ability to be nurturing with one another and to receive nurturing from each other. So go to Amazon to find Avrum's book, go to Facebook to find A Nurtured Life, and businessaspleasure.com. Back to Avrum. What are some of the fears that men have of women?
I've come up with a list of what I think are the 7 primary fears that men have of women. The first is men are afraid of being dominated and controlled by women, which we've talked about. The whole idea of pussy whip, the whole idea that the most insulting thing you can say to a man is that he's controlled by a woman. The second one is that men are afraid of being entrapped by women. And it's sort of a bizarre thing for men to be afraid of. We have all these cliches and stereotypes about women trying to trap men into committed relationships as if marriage worked better for women, when in fact we know very clearly that single women are healthier, wealthier, and happier than married women, and married men are healthier, wealthier, and happier than single men. So there's no question that marriage serves men better than it serves women, which is why men remarry so much faster than women. The third fear is the fear of failing to provide and protect for women and children. Since men are socialized to equate their entire worth as a human being with their capacity to protect and provide for their family, anytime a woman is distressed or unhappy or dissatisfied, men talk about feeling criticized all the time. That's what they mean. They mean that you're telling them that they've failed in their job as a man. The next one is that men are afraid of emotions in general. Since men tend to be not as well connected with their emotional lives and uncomfortable with their own feelings, the problem is that emotions are contagious. It's like when somebody yawns. When other people have strong feelings, men start to feel more of what they're feeling, which makes them uncomfortable. So we try to keep the conversation rational and based on the facts, because we're at a disadvantage when it becomes more emotional. And these fears, by the way, are in order of depth. Each one is a little deeper than the one before. And so we get now to men are afraid of being exposed as being inadequate. So men do understand on some level that they are not as interpersonally skilled as their female partners. And so their fear is that will be disclosed, that their partner will find out that they don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to relationships. And the deepest fear for men is the fear of being abandoned. that since our worth as human beings is dependent entirely on what we've done for you lately, that if you find out we're inadequate or what we're doing is not enough to keep you happy, then why would you keep us around? And that fear has become, of course, a lot more exaggerated for men, because it used to be that men didn't worry about women leaving them because women financially couldn't leave men. Because for a woman to get divorced almost inevitably meant living in poverty. But that's not true anymore. So there's not the same financial fears holding women in relationships. So the divorce rate is over 50%, and men are terrified that they'll be left alone.
I want to interrupt for a second, because what you're saying, you're really pointing to societal changes that are like seismic. And to me, it suggests a tipping point. So I want to get back to that. And I want to appreciate everything that you're saying. I notice that it's a lot to take in. So
that's why it's a book, not a magazine article. Because there's
this is not an article.
Right.
This also will be posted on 3 channels: on my YouTube channel, A Nurtured Life, on the Facebook group, A Nurtured Life, and on my private page, which is just my personal Facebook page. Please feel free to listen again and again. Please feel free to share it. There's some seismic social potential here. And you're one of the people that's ushering it in. You know, this is why it's so important that we're having this conversation. And it's a lot. I acknowledge that it's a lot to be hearing, a lot of kind of earth-shattering information. So keep talking to us. Somebody says, makes perfect sense as to why they don't pay women as much as men. We are the entrapped ones, not the other way around.
Yes. But remember that fears are not rational. Fears are emotional. And so fears don't have to make sense to be true. I added my email, if you'd send that to the group too, because if you email me, I'll add you to my mailing list. I post on Psychology Today about this regularly. I just had an article yesterday about, again, I had to change the title. The title I wanted to use was, Why Has Narcissist Become the New N-Word? But instead it's published as, Why Has Narcissist Become a Dirty Word?
I saw that. Well, Avrum, all I can say is you have a mind for marketing, because you've got those catchy hooks, but then people keep dulling you down.
Well, you know, but if you send me your email, I'll add you to the mailing list, and then you'll know whenever I post every week or two. And so
very good. Beautiful. So I just posted Avrum's email address. If you'd like to be on my mailing list, that's also a really good idea. Thank you for suggesting that, Avrum.
Sure.
I'm going to pop my email address also into the chat. Okay, back to men's fears.
Yep.
I have about 15 minutes left of this conversation, and I have at least a couple more questions that I want to get through. If you have a question in our Facebook audience, in our studio audience, please go ahead and post it, and I'll do my best to get to it. I see the questions, I alone. I'm kind of like the Wizard of Oz. It's pretty fun. Okay, Avrum, back to you.
Yep. What, do you have a question?
Men's fears.
Do you have a question?
Well, I think you were still enumerating men's fears.
Nope, that was it. The last one was fear of abandonment.
Okay, what causes them?
The cause, I believe, starts in, no surprise to hear a psychologist say, starts in early childhood. So here's where it's different so go back to the still face experiment. So all of us, men and women, are worried that our mommies won't love us, and that, you know, we are a species that are completely dependent on our caregivers, and so we're completely dependent on mommy loving us and taking care of us.
That's right.
The difference is that women, if you're straight, partner with a man, but men, if they're straight, partner with someone who is the same gender as their mother, and so the same issues that they had as children in terms of being worried about their mother not loving them and abandoning them and not taking care of them get transferred to their adult relationships. And that's why it's different for men than women, because we're partnering with mommy and you're not. So
Okay,
it stirred
can we have like an emotional maturity school, and instead of learning calculus, can we like learn all this other stuff? Or is that just we're supposed to get the intellectual knowledge and then we fend for ourselves in the emotional realm? And
well, kids learn the emotional realm in their families. That's mostly where we learn it.
and then we fail to upgrade it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that has been a wonderful surprise to me in this work, I run men's therapy groups, and I started my first one about 10 years ago, and I thought, this is the dumbest idea I've ever had. They're going to talk sports. They're going to talk politics. Nobody will say anything personal, or they're going to sit there in silence. And I will tell you that the men's therapy groups I have are the most open, the most committed. It was the opposite of what I expected. And what I learned is that men are dying to talk, but they don't feel safe talking with women in the room. But you put a group of men together in a room and they will start talking to each other.
Oh my God, that's so touching. So they don't feel safe. My work for the past 20 years has been about helping men feel safe. And you're adding a layer to it by really exposing the soft underbelly of men. Hearing it from a man is actually a very different experience.
I'm sure.
And I'm sure from my clients as well, who've heard me say these things over and over again. But when you're saying them and you're also adding new things, like I believe that men want to talk, and they, which is one of the comments, men do want to talk.
Yes, they do.
You're adding a new dimension from the perspective of all of your clinical experience and your intense fascination that led you to write a book. Okay, someone asked a question. How can you motivate a man to help around the house without him feeling threatened? Now, Avrum, here's where I'd go with that. I'd go right to French maid outfit. Where would you go with it?
Well, I wouldn't object to that, but I think I'm going to give you a slightly more psychological answer. But I'm not ruling out the French maid outfit. I think the way to do it, where it goes wrong between men and women, and the question is from a woman, so I'm going to address it from that perspective. If you say to a man, "Why don't you help more around the house?" That's an indictment. That's a criticism, and way more of their self-esteem is tied up in that, and it's not going to go well. But if you say, when you don't help out around the house, I really feel alone. I start to lose my confidence that you're in this with me. I start to feel like maybe you're not my partner, and I start to feel isolated and alone. And so it may not seem, taking out the trash may not seem like a big deal to you, but it actually really is to me. And I go to some dark places when you don't do it. I think that will get much less of a defensive response.
Wow.
And the headline there is talking about yourself, not him. Talking about your reaction to his behavior, not criticizing the behavior.
Yeah. So I think someone said I do tell these things to my son. Can you address how a son growing up in a house with a mother could be different than a partner in a house with a woman?
Sure. Ideally, I think it's rough. If you're talking about a son in a house with just a mother, that's a really tough job for the mom. And often what I recommend to people in that situation is to find a man for the son to kind of, if he doesn't have a father, coach, a teacher, a minister, a man in his life, an older man in his life for him to talk to. And so hopefully that man would say to him, son, when you don't do your chores around the house, it really puts your mom in a bad place.
Yes, the all-important role model, which the village had in abundance, which our isolated society really doesn't have. So the mom has the extra responsibility of flushing out a role model for her son, which can be a wonderful thing. And it's an extra responsibility on the mom.
It is, but it's a lot less of a responsibility than trying to father a boy.
That's obviously quite true.
Right. So if you had to
Okay.
pick,
Avrum, do you
yeah,
have kids, Avrum?
I do. I have 2 grown kids, boy
And
and a girl.
a boy and a girl?
Yep.
Okay. What do they think about their dad's work?
I don't know that they're very interested in it. They each have all my books on their shelf, but I honestly don't know if they've read them. I suspect they haven't.
Okay, well, we know better than to get our self-esteem from our kids anyway.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
I know they're proud of me, but I think it just goes to there.
Okay. Are men's fears of women part of why couples keep having the same arguments over and over again?
Yeah, and exactly the way I described is that they're working at cross purposes and they don't realize that. And if men would pay more attention, if the filter we need men to learn is she's not really asking me to clean up around the house. She's really saying she wants to be closer to me. And the filter women need to learn is he's not really being a jerk and refusing to help out. He's intimidated. He's scared. And if I would approach him in a different way, we could probably get somewhere. One of the questions I ask women, which is very controversial, I ask women, and you can respond to this if you want or just think about it on your own. What did you learn from your mother about men?
Oh my gosh, I've been through this many times.
Most of what I hear from women is that I learned from my mom to not expect much from men and to not think much of them. Mostly women learn condescension from their mothers about men. And if you think men don't feel that, you're wrong.
Of course, they feel it. Sure. That's right. Yes, it's one thing to, well, I'm not going to say that. That could be really controversial. I could get torched for that. Avram, I think we're on the same page. I'll have this chat with you afterwards.
Okay.
How can couples use this understanding? You are already segueing into this question.
Sure.
And does your book address this?
Yes.
How can couples use this information to make their relationships better?
It sure does. And not only that, well, yes, it does. There's a chapter on men doing their work. There's a chapter on men doing work with other men. And there's a chapter on men and women doing their work together. So for men, the first step is learning to forego the defensive withdrawal. Men's primary defense is withdrawal, which just heightens their partners. It escalates their partner's upsetness. It doesn't work. It backfires. And men have to learn how to use relationships with other men and soothe themselves so that they can tolerate leaning in when there's distress in the relationship rather than withdrawing.
Okay, so there's some ladies on this call that were recently in a corporate talk that I did for the Whole Woman virtual retreat where I talked about holding your ground. I talked about the 5 reactions to excitement or stress or fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or fit. You're saying that the masculine typically goes to
Flight.
Flight, even though in a situation with a man, he might actually go to fight, but out of deference to us as the weaker sex and out of deference to us that they love us, they go to flight.
Well, he'll go to flight first, and he'll go to fight if he's cornered and can't flee.
Okay.
So I can't tell you how many couples I've heard where I've said to men, de-escalate. Just, if the argument's getting out of control, just leave. Just say, this is not. And how many men have told me that their wives have literally physically followed them around the house.
Oh my God.
And when they've gone into another room and locked the door, that the woman has pounded on the door.
Oh my God.
Not a great
idea. Going into the cage with the bear.
Exactly.
That is really not well advised, is it?
No. But it happens a lot. So for women, the equivalent is to give up the defensive criticism. Is to try to listen and understand where their partner is coming from and drop the condescension and criticism.
Okay, good. So for my students, in other words, come from below the line in the world of the mind, the criticism, the argument, and come up onto the playing field. I call it from the battlefield to the playing field.
Yeah.
So come up to a lighthearted approach. Oh, he's being a man. Oh my gosh, he's afraid. Oh, let's see how we can warm things up again.
Exactly.
Instead of condemning and criticizing.
Yeah.
This takes practice because we all watched our moms.
That's right.
Like you said, we watched our moms be condescending, be critical, work harder, and feel resentful about it.
There's a
We
great
all
line.
saw those things.
There's a great line in the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is a great movie. And the daughter is criticizing the mom and saying, Mom, you just let dad make all the decisions and be the head of the house and run the family. And the mother looks at the daughter and says, your father's the head of the household, but I'm the neck. And whichever way the neck turns, the head has to follow.
Do you know that I quote that line too?
Oh,
That
really?
doesn't surprise
It's a
me.
great line.
I love this conversation, Avrum.
Me too.
I'm so appreciative of the perspective you're bringing, of your 10-year immersion into this. It's sociology as well as psychology. What happens in the couple influences the family, influences the society. There's so much wealth and value here. So in addition to your book, which I just popped the tiny URL in the chat so that y'all can go to Amazon and buy Avrum's book, what else can you offer right now? I also popped your email address in so people can join your mailing list and join your Men's Fears Facebook group. Is there anything you have coming up that they should know about?
Well, I'm doing a lot of podcasts like this, but here's the other thing I offer that people may be interested in. I am doing workshops with men and women on this issue. Okay. And here's what happens in the workshop. First, I talk, I give people the ideas, and then I bring a group of men up to the front of the room, and the men talk with each other about their fears. Then they sit down, and I bring a group of women up to the front of the room, and they talk about their reaction to what they just heard. And then I bring the men back to talk with the women about how it goes in their relationships. And it's a profound experience. And you cannot believe the ways in which, so you were saying before about my 10-year immersion. So think about it. All I did was listen more carefully to men speaking. And it works exactly the same in your home. If you listen more carefully, you'll learn the same things I learned. And so I am open to, if you want to do it through your church or through your organization, if you want to, and of course now online, if you're interested, if you are part of a community that would like to do a workshop like this, email me and we'll talk.
Beautiful. What do you call your workshop?
Men's Fears of Women. Men's
Fears of Women. So I just popped into the chat, Avrum. I don't know if you can see. I wrote, this works exactly the same way in your home.
Yep. No,
Listening is nurturing.
Exactly.
Listening is an aspect of nurturing. Observing is an aspect of nurturing. Observing without judgment.
Yep. There's a rabbi who was asked to define prayer, and his definition of prayer is listening. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. So we're really out of time, regretfully out of time. This is a schmooze that could go on. It could be a marathon schmooze. Folks, reach out to Avrum. Please share his work with men that you know. Please steep yourself in the very tender vulnerability that all humans have, not just female-bodied humans, but all humans.
Exactly.
And spread the love and the nurturing. These are important messages. We're in really pivotal times. All this cataclysm is happening so that our society can evolve. If you're here today, you already know you're a part of it. Avrum and I already know we're a part of it. Share with your friends. So here's how this all ends, right? I basically end the broadcast. I'm going to ask you for a couple more words if you have. Please feel free to interact in our Facebook groups or in our online forums, whatever they may be. We've given you the resources. If you need the resources again, feel free to reach out to Men's Spheres of Women on the Facebook group or a Nurtured Life Facebook group, either or. We can put you in touch with each other if you can't remember something. Avrum, any parting strokes that you want to share with the audience?
I always feel appreciative of people, as all of you have been willing to talk about your own lives. People like me who study these things don't learn anything without people being willing to open up and talk about their lives. So thank you for sharing yourselves. And I hope you will talk to your partners about what you learned today. Oh, the other thing is what some people are doing, which I think is lovely, is they're reading the book together, which I think is just delightful. They read a chapter together and then talk about it. So think about that.
So their own kind of one-to-one intimate book club.
Exactly, which I think is a great idea.
That's a beautiful idea. Maybe every home should have one.
That works for me.
That works for you. Somebody said excellent discussion.
Great.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for your questions. Avrum, thank you for your research.
My pleasure.
And I look very forward to being in touch with you soon.
Me too.
Thanks, folks. We're going to end the broadcast. And please rewatch it and please share it. Bye, everybody.
Bye.